set before his face forever. By DeMarco Cantrell Ratliff, published by Cantrell Tales and copyrighted in 2025. Narrated by Axel AI. Dedication to Ahayah, my refuge, my guide, and the one whose mercy has carried me through every shadow. To my children, Ezra, Zakai, Zion, Zariah, Josiah, and Elijah, you are the living proof of my purpose, my joy, and my reason to endure. Preface. This book was born out of pain, healing, and truth. I didn't set out to write a manual. I just needed to understand the moments when life felt too dark to handle. Psalm 41 spoke louder than any voice around me, and I realized my story was already in the scriptures. The betrayal, the envy, the fake love. It's all in there. What you're holding now isn't just a study of Psalm 41. It's a journey through it, real experiences paired with ancient truth. My hope is that this reaches someone who, like me, needed more than just comfort. They needed understanding, and most of all, they needed Ahayah. Who is Ahayah? When we open the scriptures, one of the most profound questions is, who is the Most High, and what is his name? In Exodus 3:14, KJV, when Moses encountered the burning bush, the Almighty revealed himself with the words, "And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you." In the ancient Hebrew tongue, not the modern Yiddish-influenced Hebrew spoken today, this phrase was pronounced Ahayah Ashar Ahayah, meaning I am that I am. The name Ahayah is the first-person declaration of existence, a living statement that the Creator is eternal, self-sustaining, and unchanging. Over centuries, translators replaced this divine name with titles like God or Lord, which are not names but generic descriptions. Historical records show that during the Hellenistic period and later under Roman influence, true Hebrew names were suppressed or altered. This is why many today are unfamiliar with Ahayah. Linguists and biblical scholars who study Paleo-Hebrew, the ancient script used by the Israelites, confirm that Ahayah, Ahai, captures the exact phrase the Creator spoke to Moses. It is a personal, covenant name, not just a title. Understanding this returns us to the pure worship of the Most High as he introduced himself, not as man later redefined him. To call upon Ahayah is to honor the Eternal One as he first revealed himself. It is a restoration of truth, a return to the language of the prophets, and a step out of centuries of mistranslation and tradition. Who is Yashayah? If Ahayah is the name of the Father, then who is the Son? The Messiah, widely known today by the name Jesus, did not walk the earth with that name. Jesus is a word that arose from layers of Greek and Latin translation long after the Messiah's earthly ministry. In the original tongue of the Israelites, the name given to Mary and Joseph's child carried deep meaning. Yashayah, this name translates as salvation of Ahayah, or Ahayah saves. It directly ties the Son to the Father's true name, reflecting their perfect unity. Historically, when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, the Septuagint, and later Latin, names were altered to fit those languages. The name Yashayah became Jesus in Greek and eventually Jesus in English. But no one in first-century Judea would have called him that. They knew him by his Hebrew name, which carried the power and purpose of salvation. Ancient manuscripts and linguistic studies point to the preservation of this name in early writings. The link between Ahayah, I am, and Yashayah, I am saves, is undeniable. The Messiah himself said in John 5:43, I am come in my Father's name, and ye receive me not. This is more than symbolic, it's literal. The Son bears the name of the Father because he came as the living expression of Ahayah's mercy. Calling him Yashayah restores the honor and identity stripped away by centuries of foreign rule and mistranslation. By starting this book with these truths, we remove confusion and allow every reader to step into a deeper understanding of the scriptures. When you read the chapters ahead, Every mention of Ahayah and Yashayah will remind you that you are calling on the same eternal names spoken by prophets, apostles, and by the Messiah himself, a legacy from everlasting to everlasting. Psalm 86, verse 5. For thou, Lord, art good and ready to forgive, and plenteous in mercy unto all them that call upon thee. I said, Ahayah, be merciful unto me, heal my soul, for I have sinned against thee. Psalm 41, verse 4. Chapter 1 of Set Before His Face Forever, the Cry for Mercy. There are moments in life when everything falls quiet. Not because the world outside has stopped moving, but because something inside you has broken. That kind of silence is different. It isn't peace, it's weight. A pressure pressing down on the chest, invisible but undeniable. For me, that silence came when I could no longer outrun the damage I had done to myself. At first, I blamed everything around me: people, circumstances, betrayal, even generational pain. I convinced myself I was merely reacting to the world's attacks. But the more I looked in the mirror, the more I realized I was hiding behind that lie. Like David, I had to stop blaming the people who hurt me and face the truth of my own sin. I used to think my pain came entirely from what others did to me. But deep down, I knew my own choices were part of my brokenness. When I finally admitted to Ahayah what I had done, it felt like taking the first real breath in years. Asking him to heal my soul was the only honest prayer I could find. Saying heal my soul isn't just words. It's an ache, a confession, a surrender of pride. I remember nights when I felt like my own mind was turning against me, when I couldn't tell if it was my enemies or my own guilt that kept me awake. I understood then why David didn't ask for riches or revenge, but for healing in the deepest part of himself. My soul was sick in a way no one else could touch. There's a difference between being wounded and being soul sick. Wounds bleed, bruise, and eventually scar. But soul sickness is something deeper. It can't be seen with the eyes. It reveals itself in how you react, how you shut down, how you sabotage your own peace. It's a torment that lives in silence behind a smile. Unhealed guilt becomes a filter. It changes how you hear words, how you see people, and how you interpret everything around you. I couldn't tell if I was truly being mistreated, or if I was just carrying so much unrepented sin that everything felt like judgment. I began to understand what it meant when Scripture says the heart is deceitful above all things. My own heart had me trapped. The more I looked outward, the more I realized that my greatest war was within. I had let bitterness, shame, and pride accumulate like debris in a flooded house. On the surface, things looked normal. But beneath it all, the foundation was rotting. I couldn't pray the same anymore. I couldn't even fake peace. In that place of despair, I didn't come to Ahayah with fancy words or deep theology. I came broken, confused, and tired. And the only words I could truly say were, "Be merciful unto me. Heal my soul." That prayer wasn't poetic, but it was real. And I believe that's why he heard it. The truth is, most people will never know how sick their soul is until they stop pretending to be okay. I had to lay down the image I was holding up for others. I had to stop trying to be the strong one, the survivor, the one who always keeps pushing. Strength in the wrong direction is still weakness. I needed healing, not hustle. Mercy is the doorway to healing. Not just the mercy to be forgiven, but the mercy to be seen, to be understood, to be held by something greater than shame. That kind of mercy doesn't come from people. It comes only from Ahayah. And when it came, I didn't feel it as fireworks or angels. I felt it as silence that didn't accuse me, a stillness that didn't press me down. From the moment I asked for mercy, the process of healing didn't happen overnight, but something shifted. I didn't need to defend myself as much. I didn't need to explain my pain to people who couldn't understand it anyway. I stopped waiting for others to validate my hurt. Ahayah had seen it. That was enough. The cry for mercy didn't erase my past, but it began to rewrite my story. I was no longer just a victim of betrayal or a product of bad choices. I was someone who had looked at the darkness inside and didn't run from it. I brought it to the only one who could handle it. I handed it to Ahayah. I've come to believe that healing begins not with answers, but with surrender. David didn't ask for strategy. He asked for restoration. He didn't say, "Give me vengeance." He said, "Heal me." That's the difference between someone who survives and someone who's truly changed. When you ask Ahayah to heal your soul, you're not asking to feel better. You're asking to become whole. You're asking him to rearrange what sin has disordered, to breathe life back into places that felt dead. And that's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Even now when I pray, I start with those same words. Be merciful unto me. Not because I'm in the same place I was back then, but because I never want to forget where healing comes from. It doesn't come from time. It doesn't come from distractions. It comes from truth meeting mercy in the presence of Ahayah. This chapter of my life taught me something I'll never forget, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be honest with the Most High. Not perform, not pretend. Just come as you are and let him handle what you've been carrying for too long. Healing doesn't always feel like a miracle. Sometimes it feels like peace after a storm. Sometimes it feels like crying for no reason and realizing it's because the weight is finally lifting. Sometimes it feels like nothing changed, except you. And when that change begins, even if the world around you stays the same, you start walking differently. You think clearer. You see deeper. You breathe freer. That's the power of a healed soul. It doesn't erase the past, but it redeems your future. And it always, always starts with mercy. Mine enemies speak evil of me. When shall he die, and his name perish? Psalm 41, verse 5, chapter 2. When enemies plot your end. The cry for mercy opens the soul to healing. But that doesn't mean the world around you suddenly changes. If anything, it gets louder. Enemies who once stayed in the background begin to show their faces, not always openly, but subtly. Once your soul starts waking up, you begin to see things you ignored before, and sometimes what you see is the quiet hatred of those around you. I'll never forget when I realized that some people in my life weren't just upset with me. They actually wanted to see me fall. It wasn't always in what they said, but in how they watched. They waited. It was in the silence when they could have defended me but chose to stay quiet. It was in the way they smiled at my pain, even if they tried to hide it. That kind of opposition is harder to confront because it hides behind familiarity. David's words hit home because they reveal what most people don't want to admit. Some enemies don't want to fight you. They want to outlive you. They don't just want you hurt, they want you forgotten. When shall he die, and his name perish? That's not just an insult, that's a curse, and I felt it. When someone wants your name to fade, they're not just attacking you in the moment, they're trying to erase your future. The danger with this kind of hidden hatred is that it often comes disguised as concern. They'll ask how you're doing while hoping you're still struggling. They'll offer advice that leads you nowhere. They'll pretend to care but always keep a subtle record of your failures. I started to realize that not everyone who checks in is checking in for the right reason. There's something about favor, the kind that comes from Ahayah, that stirs up jealousy in people who've never known how to find it. They see your light, your peace, your potential, and instead of being inspired by it, they resent it. At first, I used to question myself. Did I do something wrong to deserve this? But over time I saw what David saw. Sometimes enemies speak evil simply because your existence reminds them of everything they refuse to confront in themselves. The hardest part isn't surviving what they say, but enduring the silence that follows. Because when people speak evil of you, others often believe it or spread it. I watched as lies about me grew legs, walked into rooms I hadn't entered, and painted pictures of me I never signed off on. I was being misrepresented in places I hadn't even spoken. That hurts in a way that's hard to explain, because it's not just slander, it's spiritual warfare. Still, there was something sacred about that season of isolation. I stopped depending on people for approval. I stopped explaining myself to everyone. I started going to Ahayah directly, the same way David did. Because if he sees everything, the motives, the envy and the whispers, then he also holds the power to defend me in ways no conversation ever could. I used to think defending myself was strength. But I've learned that silence, when placed in Ahayah's hands, can become one of the loudest declarations of trust. It was no longer about proving people wrong. It was about allowing the Most High to prove me right, in His way, in His time. I also realized that people who want your name to perish usually don't know your purpose. They focus on your past or present, but Ahayah writes toward the future. And if He still has use for your name, it doesn't matter who tries to erase it. He will make sure it echoes, not for pride, but for purpose. What David felt, I felt too. That deep sting of knowing someone's praying for your downfall behind a smile. It used to break me. Now it builds me. Because every time I've survived a false word, I've come out wiser. Every time I was written off, I came back stronger. Not because of me, but because of who covered me. The truth is, this chapter of life is one we all face eventually. If you're walking in any kind of light, if you've been marked for any kind of favor, there will be those who can't stand it. They'll pretend it's about something else. But at the root, it's always envy. Envy doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. But even when people want to bury your name, Ahayah remembers it. He called you by name before you were born. He knew the battles you'd face before the first word of slander was ever spoken. And He isn't swayed by rumors. He deals in truth. That's why I stopped losing sleep over what people thought. I had to. Because their words were temporary, but my purpose was eternal. I had to remind myself that this was nothing new. David went through it. The prophets went through it. Even Yashayah was lied on, hated and betrayed. If they faced it and kept going, so could I. And somewhere in all of that pain, I found a strange kind of peace. A peace that doesn't depend on being liked. A peace that stands even when your name is dragged. Because once your soul is healed, you're not living to protect your image. You're living to walk in truth. And truth always outlives lies. The words people speak about you are not as powerful as the words Ahayah speaks over you. I had to let that truth become my foundation. Because once I stopped reacting to every attack, I started recognizing the growth happening in the silence. The more they spoke, the more He shaped me. Now I see the purpose behind the pain. Without the pressure of those enemies, I might have never learned how to pray from that place of raw honesty. Without the betrayal, I wouldn't know the sweetness of being defended by Ahayah himself. And without the lies, I wouldn't have found the deeper truth of who I really am. So let them speak. Let them whisper. Let them wonder why you're still standing. Because when your strength comes from above, no weapon, not even a word, can truly prosper. David wasn't broken by their words. He was brought closer to Ahayah because of them. That's the lesson. The attack may feel personal, but the outcome is spiritual. And if he come to see me, he speaketh vanity. His heart gathereth iniquity to itself. When he goeth abroad, he telleth it. Psalm 41 verse 6. Chapter 3. The Whisperers and Their Vanity. There's something especially painful about betrayal when it comes dressed as concern. The ones who smile in your face, sit by your side and ask, "How are you?" Not because they care, but because they want a story to run with. I've seen this firsthand, and it cuts deep. The ones who came to check on me weren't there for my healing, they were there to collect. David's words ring loud here. He wasn't just attacked by obvious enemies, he was wounded by pretenders. People who acted like friends only to leave and speak vanity, empty words, twisted truths. That kind of wound goes beyond the physical or even emotional, it's spiritual. It makes you doubt not just others but yourself. Did I say too much? Did I trust the wrong person? Was I foolish for opening up? I remember a specific moment. I had just gone through something heavy, something personal. Someone I considered close came over, offered comfort, asked questions, nodded with concern. It felt safe. But days later, I heard my own story being retold, misquoted, and used as entertainment. That betrayal burned more than any argument or open attack ever could. What David reveals here is a timeless pattern. People will pretend to care in order to exploit your weakness. They speak vanity, that is emptiness, flattery, and surface-level words that don't come from a place of love. Instead, their hearts are busy gathering iniquity, storing bitterness, twisting your pain into their own ammunition. It's a quiet violence, but a powerful one. You learn that not all who come to your side do so with clean intentions. Some people are more concerned with the appearance of compassion than with actual care. They want to be seen as supportive, while their real goal is to gather drama, to extract your pain and repackage it for their own narrative. David exposes their true motive, iniquity. This isn't a one-time event. It becomes a cycle. They visit, they flatter, they collect, and then they broadcast. When he goeth abroad, he telleth it, David says. That phrase alone could define entire seasons of my life. I didn't realize some people were more reporters than friends. They listened not to understand, but to leak. It's a devastating thing to confront. You start questioning your ability to discern. You rethink every conversation. You begin to wall off your heart to protect what's left. It's not just a loss of a relationship, it's the erosion of trust itself. And trust, once lost, is harder to rebuild than any broken bridge. But what's powerful about this psalm is not just David's pain, it's his clarity. He sees through the act. He names the behavior. He shines a light on the manipulation. That clarity became my own strength. It taught me that I wasn't wrong for being open. They were wrong for being deceitful. In moments like that, when you're left wounded by false kindness, it's tempting to become cold, to shut everyone out, to match deceit with bitterness. But David doesn't go there. He speaks truth but not hate. He acknowledges the pain without becoming the pain. That's a higher road, and one I had to learn to walk. I began to see that the whispers weren't really about me. They were projections of others' own vanity and emptiness. People who gossip about others are often trying to distract from their own emptiness. It doesn't excuse them, but it reveals that their iniquity is internal. It begins in their own heart long before it ever reaches their mouth. This also revealed something about me. My openness wasn't a flaw. My honesty, my vulnerability, my desire to trust, these weren't mistakes. They were strengths that had been mishandled by the wrong people. And Ahayah began to show me that when shared with the right hearts, those same traits become a source of life and healing. Sometimes the greatest protection isn't building higher walls, it's gaining deeper wisdom. Not everyone deserves access to your spirit. Not everyone should be invited into your pain. That doesn't mean you live guarded forever. It means you learn to discern the difference between the voice of healing and the voice of gossip. Ahayah never once ignored the whispers. Every word spoken against you in the dark, every secret conversation meant to tear you down. He heard them all. There's comfort in that. Vindication doesn't always come in the form of confrontation. Sometimes it comes in peace, in restoration, in the quiet rebuilding of your soul while their lies collapse on their own. David's psalm is a mirror and a map. A mirror to recognize the whisperers and the vain visitors in your own life, but also a map to guide you through the aftermath. You don't have to become like them to survive them. You rise above them by standing in truth, wrapped in wisdom, guarded by grace. So if you've ever felt betrayed by someone who sat beside you with false concern, know this: you're not alone. David saw it. I've lived it. And yet we rise. Our identity isn't shaped by what they whispered. It's shaped by who we are when no one is watching, and who we choose to become when the whispers fade. Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. Psalm 41, verse 9, chapter 4. The familiar friend who betrays. Betrayal doesn't hit hardest when it comes from a stranger. It hits when it comes from the one who knew you best, the one who shared your table, your secrets, your life. That's the weight behind David's words. This wasn't just any enemy. This was a friend, familiar, trusted, loved. I remember the moment I realized someone I thought was family had turned on me. It was subtle at first, a shift in energy, a change in how they spoke about me when I wasn't around. Then came the silence, the cold shoulder, the quiet alliance with those who didn't care if I lived or died. That's when it hit. This wasn't just falling out of touch. This was betrayal. David calls it like it is. The heel lifted against you. It's not just a stab in the back. It's a sign of complete disrespect, of someone stepping over you like you were nothing. The friend who once broke bread with you now acts like they were never fed by your kindness. That's what betrayal feels like. It rewrites history. It tries to erase the good you did, just to justify their turn against you. What made it worse was the silence. No warning, no conversation, just distance. And behind that distance, I could feel the whispers, the spinning of stories, the sharing of things I once shared in confidence. I kept asking myself how we went from laughing together to becoming strangers, enemies even, overnight. But maybe it wasn't overnight. Maybe it was building slowly in their heart, while I was too busy being open and trusting to notice. That's what makes betrayal so chilling. It means that while you were being real, someone else was collecting ammunition. Every weakness you shared, every wound you exposed, became something they could use later. It's the weaponizing of intimacy. There's a spiritual lesson in that. Not everyone who eats with you is at peace with you. Some people dine with you while dreaming of your downfall. That doesn't make you foolish for trusting, it makes you human. But it does make the hurt deeper. Because love was present once. Respect lived there. And now it's just ashes. David knew this pain deeply. His words weren't just poetic. They were personal. He wasn't talking about an enemy on the battlefield. He was talking about someone who knew his home. Someone who shared his laughter. Someone who likely said, "I got you," and meant none of it. That familiarity, that closeness, is what gave the betrayal its sting. I remember pacing the room in disbelief when I found out the truth. It felt like my whole chest caved in. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted understanding. I wanted to know why. What changed? Was it something I did? Something I missed? But silence offers no answers, and betrayal rarely comes with explanations. That's when I turned to this psalm. When David spoke about his familiar friend, it felt like someone finally understood the level of grief I was walking through. This wasn't just a broken relationship. It was a rupture in the soul. A deep, spiritual wound that takes time and truth to heal. I began to understand that not all losses are meant to be restored. Some people walk out or strike out because they were never truly walking with you to begin with. They just liked what you provided, the support, the energy, the blessings. But once your struggle got real, or your light started to shine too bright, they couldn't take it. So they lifted their heel. The hardest part was not letting it change me. Betrayal tempts you to shut down, to never trust again, never open up. But I couldn't live like that. I had to learn how to grieve it without becoming it. I had to allow Ahayah to step in and remind me that he never betrays, that his loyalty isn't seasonal. Through all of this, I've learned that Ahayah sees what we can't. He sees the hidden intentions of hearts. And sometimes, in his mercy, he allows betrayal to surface so that we can stop feeding snakes and start feeding our soul. It's protection in disguise, even if it feels like heartbreak at first. What shocked me most was how peaceful I became once I let it go. Once I accepted the betrayal, grieved the loss, and surrendered the why to Ahayah, a strange stillness entered me. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I realized I didn't need to keep holding it. I was still standing, still breathing, still blessed. David ends his psalm not with bitterness, but with hope. He doesn't let betrayal define him. He lets it teach him. That's what I want to carry with me. Not the pain, but the wisdom. not the betrayal, but the growth. Because if even the Son of Man was betrayed by one who dipped bread with him, then I'm in divine company. So to anyone walking through this, know that you're not alone. The familiar friend may have lifted their heel, but you don't have to stay down. You don't have to harden. You don't have to close off your heart forever. Just recognize the lesson. Hold fast to your Creator and walk forward with discernment. You're still called. You're still chosen. You're still covered. And the one who never leaves your side will heal every crack, restore your strength, and prepare a table, not just for you, but in the very presence of those who once tried to crush you. Let them lift their heel. Ahayah will lift you higher. But thou, O Lord, be merciful unto me, and raise me up, that I may requite them. Psalm 41:10. Chapter 5. Rise again, mercy beyond justice. There comes a moment when survival is no longer enough. When you've cried all your tears, felt every betrayal, and faced every whisper, and you're still breathing. That moment right there is sacred. It's where you decide if you'll rise bitter, or if you'll rise whole. I was standing in that moment once, heart bruised, trust shattered, mind exhausted. And I could feel two roads ahead of me, one paved by justice, the other by mercy. The flesh wanted payback, wanted to show everyone that I didn't deserve the things they did or said. But the Spirit whispered something else. Rise differently. David's words are clear. He asks to be raised, not just healed, not just delivered, but raised up. Why? So he could answer his enemies, yes, but I believe there's more to it. He didn't want to rise to get revenge. He wanted to rise as proof that Ahayah's mercy is stronger than man's injustice. There's something powerful about being raised by mercy. When you come back from betrayal, not with bitterness, but with clarity. When you walk past the people who tried to bury you, not with revenge in your eyes, but peace on your face. That's what it means to rise beyond justice. I learned that justice, at least human justice, is rarely satisfying. Even if people apologize, it can't undo the damage. Even if they pay for what they did, it doesn't restore the time lost or the innocence broken. But mercy heals deeper. Mercy lifts you up in ways justice never could. Mercy doesn't mean you pretend nothing happened. It means you trust Ahayah to handle what you can't. It means you release your right to vengeance and pick up the power of grace. And that grace does more than forgive. It restores. It elevates. It marks you. David didn't rise in the eyes of people. He rose in the presence of the Most High. And I wanted that kind of rising. Not one built on performance or proving anything to those who doubted me, but one built on purpose. Quiet, holy purpose. That's what real elevation looks like. When Ahayah raises you, he does it in a way that no man can take credit for. You'll look back and realize it wasn't your strategy or connections or image that saved you. It was his hand. That's when you know it was mercy. Because mercy shows up when you have nothing left to offer but surrender. The people who counted you out won't understand your rising. They'll search for explanations. Maybe he had help. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe she just got lucky. But they won't know the nights you cried on the floor, the prayers you whispered with no words left, the silence you endured without clapping back. That's mercy's hidden work. And here's the wild thing. Sometimes Ahayah will raise you right in front of the very people who tried to keep you down, not to shame them, but to remind them who he is. Your life becomes a living testimony, not of your strength, but of his grace, not of your power, but of his presence. I had to learn to sit in that, to not rush the rising, to not chase closure, to not beg for justice in the way the world defines it, because Ahayah's justice is bigger. It includes mercy, it includes restoration, it includes lessons I didn't even know I needed to learn. Every time I tried to get back at someone, I felt emptier. But every time I chose mercy, even when it felt unfair, I felt lighter. Mercy doesn't just heal relationships. Sometimes it just heals you. It makes sure that the damage doesn't settle in your bones and harden your heart. There were people who hurt me, who never said sorry. people who acted like nothing happened. And yet, here I am, still blessed, still rising, still favored. That's mercy. That's proof that justice isn't always getting even. Sometimes it's just getting free. I know now that being raised by Ahayah doesn't mean life becomes perfect, but it means your soul does. It means your footing becomes firmer. It means your vision gets clearer. It means the things that once would have broken you now just remind you how far you've come. David's plea wasn't just to stand tall again. It was to stand right, to stand with integrity, to stand with the favor of Ahayah still resting on his life. That's the kind of rising I pray for, the kind that makes no sense to the world but brings full peace to the soul. So if you're in that place, in the pit of betrayal, in the valley of lies, in the silence after the storm, know this: mercy is coming. Not because you earned it, but because he gives it. And when he raises you, it won't be halfway. It'll be complete. You won't just walk again. You'll walk with clarity. You'll walk with confidence. And you'll walk with a kind of quiet joy that only comes from being kept by the Most High. This is what it means to rise again. Not by revenge. Not by clapping back. Not even by justice as we know it. But by something better. Mercy that rewrites the whole story. By this I know that thou favourest me, because mine enemy doth not triumph over me. Psalm 41:11, chapter 6. Triumph without boasting, Ahayah's favour. Sometimes the greatest victory is the one that doesn't make noise. In a world obsessed with public wins and loud celebrations, I came to understand that true triumph often happens in silence, where only you and Ahayah know what you overcame. The psalmist David recognized this too. He didn't shout about crushing his enemies. Instead, he found deep assurance in one quiet truth. They did not triumph. That alone was proof of Ahayah's favor. There was a point in my life where I stopped looking for applause. I used to want people to see how far I'd come, to witness my growth, to validate my effort. But the more I matured, the more I realized that some victories are too sacred for a crowd. When your enemies plot your downfall and you're still standing, that's favor. When they slander your name but it keeps getting spoken in rooms you never stepped foot in, that's favor. Not luck, not coincidence. Favor. It took a lot to accept that I didn't have to prove myself to the people who doubted me. The urge to say, "Look at me now," burned strong. But Ahayah kept me grounded. He reminded me that I was never fighting to impress others. I was surviving by his grace. The real triumph wasn't the clapback or the flashy comeback. It was peace. It was strength to keep going without bitterness. It was knowing I could win without becoming like the people who wanted me to lose. David understood this balance. He had enemies, betrayals, isolation, yet he didn't become hardened. His psalms show a man who knew pain, but chose not to be defined by it. He leaned into mercy, not vengeance. That resonated with me. We live in a time where people clap back, expose each other, throw shade. But there's something more powerful in restraint. Real favor isn't petty. Real favor doesn't need revenge. It just keeps shining, unbothered, unmoved. The more I studied David's words, the more I started to trace my own life through them. The moments when I wanted to retaliate but chose silence. The moments when I could have exposed someone, but held my peace. And somehow, I always ended up ahead. Not because I was perfect, but because favor carried me where pride would have left me stuck. Every time I bit my tongue when I wanted to lash out, I gave room for Ahayah to act on my behalf. Favor doesn't always mean you get the house, the car, the big win. Sometimes it means you get your mind back. You sleep at night while your enemies wrestle with their guilt and bitterness. You stay focused while they stay fixated. That's the kind of win David is talking about. He wasn't gloating. He was testifying. There's a difference. Boasting points at self. Testimony points at the Most High. I've had people smile in my face and dig pits behind my back. I've seen plans form to make me fail, but I watched them crumble without lifting a finger. That's when I knew, this isn't me. This is Ahayah. The favor on my life is louder than their noise. And when you learn to trust that, You stop chasing validation from people who were never meant to understand your journey. One of the biggest lessons in this walk is realizing that not everyone will see your value, and that's okay. Favor is not democratic. It's divine. It's not earned through popularity or likability. It's given by the one who sees your heart, your effort, your tears. And when he decides to lift you up, no enemy can hold you down. That's the kind of triumph David wrote about, a personal victory with spiritual roots. The danger comes when we try to match the energy of those who oppose us. When we stoop to their level, we step out of favor and into ego. I had to learn this the hard way. There were times I clapped back, and it felt good, for a moment. But later, I felt empty. Why? Because the win didn't come from the spirit, it came from the flesh, and flesh can never satisfy the soul. But when you let Ahayah fight your battles, the outcome is different. He doesn't just protect your reputation, he elevates your character. He doesn't just silence your enemies, he teaches you how to walk in peace while they talk. That kind of growth is worth more than public validation. It's a spiritual maturity that turns you into someone even you didn't think you could become. I learned to thank Ahayah for closed doors, unanswered calls, and invisible protection. I used to feel abandoned when people walked away. Now I realize they weren't part of the favor equation. Not everyone is meant to witness your triumph. Sometimes the ones who leave early are spared from the responsibility of seeing you shine, and that's okay too. When David said, "My enemies do not triumph over me," he wasn't just talking about the past, he was speaking over his future. That verse became a shield for me. Whenever I sensed opposition, I'd whisper those words like a promise. They will not triumph. Not because I'm perfect, not because I'm strong, but because I'm favored. And favor changes everything. As you read this, maybe you're in that silent space between betrayal and breakthrough. Maybe you feel like you're just barely hanging on. I've been there. But let this chapter remind you, you don't need to make noise to prove you're rising. Your endurance is already proof. Your peace is already evidence. Your survival is already a declaration that favor has found you. Don't be discouraged by the noise around you. Favor is quiet, but undeniable. Don't waste energy trying to convince people of your worth. Ahayah has already declared it. Let his favor be your response. Let his presence be your defense. Let your life be the testimony that speaks louder than words ever could. And when you do rise, and you will, rise with humility. Rise with grace. Rise without needing to boast, because the truth is, those who need to boast aren't secure in their blessing. But you'll know that it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving Ahayah right. And as for me, thou upholdest me in mine integrity, and settest me before thy face forever. Psalm 41:12. Chapter 7. Before his face forever. The integrity path. There's something powerful about being seen, not just by people, but by the Most High. David's words in this psalm reveal the unshakable assurance of a man who knows that despite betrayal, wounds, and slander, Ahayah has not turned his face away. That's not something to be taken lightly. In a world where people are quick to walk away when things get messy, knowing you're still standing before the face of the Almighty means everything. This verse speaks to the reward of integrity, and to be honest, it hit me hard the first time I truly understood it. It's easy to live clean when no one's watching, or when you're trying to impress others. But walking in true integrity means staying aligned with righteousness even when you're alone, even when your name is being dragged through the mud. That's what separates the pretenders from the real ones. I've had to walk through seasons where I felt completely unseen by people, even misunderstood by those I loved. But I kept walking straight because I wasn't doing it for applause or pity. I was doing it because I feared Ahayah and wanted to be pleasing in his sight. There were moments when I questioned if he saw me at all, but those doubts never lasted long. His peace always returned, often stronger than before. When David says, "Thou upholdest me," he's not just talking about divine protection, he's talking about being sustained from within. That's something I've experienced too. There's a kind of inner strength that doesn't come from affirmations or motivational quotes. It comes from knowing you're walking in truth, and that truth walks with you. It doesn't always feel flashy, but it is solid, like unshakable ground beneath your feet. We live in a time when being seen by others is everything. Social media has convinced people that visibility is proof of value. But this verse reminds us that the only face that truly matters is Ahayah's. To be set before his face, to have his attention, his approval, his favor, that's the ultimate validation. Everything else fades in comparison. The path of integrity is not always celebrated. In fact, it's often the quiet road. You don't get parades for telling the truth when a lie would have benefited you. You don't get standing ovations for choosing humility over revenge. But you do get peace. Real, unbreakable peace. And more than that, you get positioned before Ahayah himself. That's worth more than any spotlight. I used to think favor looked like constant blessings, financial breakthroughs, and everything going my way. But the deeper I walked with Ahayah, the more I realized favor often looks like endurance. The power to keep going, to keep smiling, to keep standing when others would have fallen. That's favor. And it's born out of a life of integrity. David knew what it was like to be hunted, hated, and betrayed, yet he still held on to his integrity. That shows me it's possible to be broken and whole at the same time. Pain doesn't cancel integrity. If anything, it reveals it. When everything around you is crumbling, and you still choose to walk upright, that's when integrity becomes real. This path isn't about perfection. I've messed up more than once. But what I've learned is that integrity isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after the fall. Do you cover it up, or do you confess it? Do you pretend, or do you repent? Ahayah doesn't expect flawless people. He expects honest ones. And when you're honest before him, he lifts you up. That's what David experienced. He was flawed but favored. Why? Because he didn't hide. He brought his mess to the Most High, and in return was upheld. That's what I've had to learn too. Not to run from Ahayah when I fail, but to run to him. That's where the power is. I've been set before his face in moments when I didn't even think I deserved to be. That's the beauty of grace. It doesn't make sense to human logic, but it's exactly what we need. And the more I walked in integrity, the more I realized this wasn't about earning Ahayah's love. It was about responding to it. People will try to define you by your past, your pain, or your mistakes. But Ahayah defines you by your heart. If your heart is set on him, he will uphold you. If your walk is sincere, even in its stumbles, he will honor it. That truth gave me the courage to keep pressing forward, even when nothing around me looked promising. There's a deep joy in knowing your life is being lived before his face. Not because you want to be religious or perfect, but because you know who you belong to. That awareness changes everything. How you talk, how you treat people, how you handle conflict, and how you recover from failure. It's like living with your head up, no matter what tries to weigh you down. I've seen what happens when people build their lives around being seen by the world. It eventually crumbles. But those who walk in quiet obedience, those who refuse to compromise for clout, they are the ones Ahayah sets before his face. That's the kind of recognition I seek now. Not viral fame, but eternal favor. So when the storms come, and they will, I remember who upholds me. I remember that my strength doesn't come from people validating me or enemies failing to destroy me. It comes from the one who sees everything, judges righteously, and never turns his face away from those who walk uprightly. To be set before his face forever, that's the prize. Not just in this life, but beyond it. And the path that leads there is paved with integrity. Not perfection, but truth. Not pride, but humility. Not noise, but quiet strength. And that's the road I choose to walk, no matter who watches, because he does. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel from everlasting and to everlasting. Amen and amen. Psalm 41:13. Chapter 8. Blessed be Ahayah, from everlasting to everlasting. There comes a moment when words fall short, when the soul, after traveling through valleys of betrayal, heartache, whispers, and silent wars, stands still and lifts its eyes to heaven. After all is said and done, all plots exposed, all pain faced, there's one truth that never changes. Ahayah is eternal. He was before our enemies breathed their first breath, and he will remain long after their names fade into dust. That's the comfort this psalm closes with. Not revenge, not even vindication, but reverence. A blessing that rises from the ashes of everything. I used to think the best way to win was to prove everyone wrong. But when I saw how fleeting opinions are, how quickly people turn, and how fragile approval can be, I realized that only one voice matters. Only one hand holds time. Ahayah doesn't just rescue. He reigns, and not for a moment, but forever. This was the shift I needed. This is the shift David shows us. He ends the psalm not stuck in bitterness, but wrapped in awe. From everlasting to everlasting means he's not just present in the moment we call on him. He was already working before we even felt the pain, and he will still be king when our pain has passed. It means nothing catches him by surprise. Nothing can undo his plan. Not betrayal, not gossip, not sickness, not abandonment. This brought me peace when I felt like the ground was shaking under me. Ahayah is steady when everything else falls apart. I remember nights where my prayers turned into tears and I had no more words to say. In those moments, it wasn't theology or deep study that held me. It was this simple truth. He is everlasting. He never left. He saw the beginning, and he has already seen the end. And through it all, he chose to stay with me. That's more powerful than any miracle. That's what it means to be kept. Sometimes we rush through blessings like they're footnotes at the end of a long story. But David pauses here, on purpose. He doesn't close with drama or resolution. He ends with worship. Because when you've walked through the valley with Ahayah, when he's carried you through betrayal, loneliness, sickness, and slander, you stop needing answers. You start offering thanks. This kind of blessing isn't just a declaration, it's a response. It's what happens when you realize you should have been consumed but weren't. You should have given up, but you didn't. You should have lost everything, yet here you are, still breathing, still standing, still believing. That's not strength. That's mercy. That's Ahayah's hand keeping you in ways you didn't even notice. Even when justice seemed delayed or the healing didn't come right away, he was still God, still kind, still holy, still worthy. The more I grow, the more I realize that my story is less about what happened to me and more about who he remained to be, faithful. And his faithfulness stretches farther than my understanding ever will. We live in a world that tries to measure everything. How long will this pain last? How soon will things change? How far will this problem go? But we serve a God who exists outside of time. From everlasting to everlasting is not poetic filler. It's divine reality. It means that even when the clocks run out and the timelines disappoint us, he still remains. I've had to learn how to bless him not just when things are good, but when they are confusing, when life doesn't add up, when healing looks different than expected. That's when this kind of praise matters most. When you're standing in the middle of unanswered prayers and you say with trembling lips, "Blessed be Ahayah," that's not weakness, that's faith. Blessing Ahayah doesn't mean you understand everything. It means you trust him anyway. It means your love isn't based on outcomes but on who he is. It's saying, even if I don't see it yet, I know you're still worthy. That's the kind of worship that heaven leans in to hear. That's the kind that breaks chains no one else sees. David understood this. After everything, after being betrayed by close friends, after falling ill, after enemies cheered for his downfall, he still ends with praise. Because praise isn't a reaction, it's a weapon. It's the final word when everything else has been said. The enemies had their chance. The fake friends spoke their lies. But David ends with truth, the only truth that lasts. Blessed be Yashayah. This chapter closes the psalm, but it opens up eternity. It invites us to see beyond our immediate pain and recognize the hands that have held us all along. You might be walking through the hardest season of your life, but take heart, Ahayah hasn't changed. He's still worthy of blessing. And the moment you lift your eyes and say it with your heart, something shifts in the spirit. Eternity touches time. This isn't just about surviving trials. It's about becoming someone who blesses even with broken pieces, someone who learns that praise is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. And when you bless Ahayah from that place, something powerful happens. You align yourself with the rhythm of heaven. You walk with the one who has no beginning and no end. So I bless him, not because everything is perfect, but because he is. I bless him in the waiting, in the unknown, in the moments where I'm still healing, because his name is holy, his love is pure, and his reign is everlasting. Amen. So be it. About the author. DeMarco Cantrell Ratliff is a prophetic voice and a creative visionary, called to reveal truth in a world addicted to noise. As the founder of the YouTube channel Divine Declarations, he has cultivated a growing audience of over 4,000 subscribers hungry for spiritual depth, holy wisdom, and real-world revelation. On Facebook, he engages a community of more than 5,500 followers, offering encouragement, insight, and bold truth rooted in the name of Ahayah. As a writer, music artist, Discord developer, and NFT creator, he has used his gifts to build online sanctuaries, spaces where the chosen can grow in wisdom, walk in discernment, and stay hidden until revealed. But at the core of it all, DeMarco is simply a servant, a man who listens for the whisper of Ahayah and walks in obedience, quietly, boldly, and on purpose.